Scott Williamson is president of Quality Outcomes Incorporated, a company dedicated to establishing a consensus-building approach to identify broad-based O&P outcomes data, to identify and teach professional best practices. Scott just celebrated his 20th year in the nonprofit community and is active in several healthcare-related activities.
I'm Scott Williamson, and I'm pleased to present this series to you. Remember that you must correctly complete the ethics questionnaire in order to get credit for taking this course, and you must complete both Part 1 and Part 2 of the ethics series to get the hour of credit for ethics as required by state law. Before we can begin a discussion about ethics, we ought to think about what it really means to be ethical. Most of us have a sense of right and wrong, and we typically think of ethical behavior in those terms. While not attempting to alter your moral fiber, we want to take a good look at ethics in the business context. If we were alone and the decisions we made have no effect on anyone else, the theory that ethics is relative might be okay. But since by its very definition, business requires interaction between at least two people, the probability for ethical conflict is significant. That's why it's important to have a strong ethics code in your business. We're going to look at how group dynamics impact values and morals, how a business leader can shape ethical behavior, and why it's important to be a good corporate citizen. Simply put, ethics involves learning what's right or wrong, and then doing the right thing. But the right thing isn't nearly as straightforward as we often hear in literature. Most ethical dilemmas in the workplace are not simply a matter of should Bob steal from Jack or should Jack lie to the boss. Ethicists assert that there's always a right thing to do based on a moral principle, and others believe the right thing to do depends on the situation, that it's up to the individual ultimately. Philosophers consider ethics to be the science of conduct. We can say that ethics includes the fundamental ground rules by which we live our lives. Philosophers have been discussing ethics for at least 2,500 years, since the time of Socrates and Plato. Many ethicists consider emerging ethical beliefs to be state-of-the-art legal matters. In other words, what becomes an ethical guideline today is often translated into a law, regulation, or rule tomorrow. Values which guide how we ought to behave are considered moral values. Values such as respect, honesty, fairness, responsibility, and others. Statements about how these values are applied are sometimes called moral or ethical principles. Today, if you look in the papers or watch the news, you're going to see many instances of investigations and arrests and in the headlines. Physicians are taking money from pharmaceutical companies, you see it every day, and the FDA even has device advisors who are getting direct money from device manufacturers. So conflicts exist in our world all day long. Individuals can make the difference in ethical expectations and behavior. You can see that when companies have a strong code, the instance of people putting their own interests ahead of the others is lower. When you have a weak moral code, those instances are high. We have issues with bosses lying to employees or misrepresenting the truth because it's easier. You've heard it said, I'd rather you hurt me with the truth than make me feel better with a lie. We can deal with truth better. Employees misrepresenting hours are another example of workplace ethical issues. And safety violations. You may see something that is wrong. Cooking food in your plastic oven, for instance, is that an ethical violation? There's poison in there. We should be careful to take care of our safety violations. Internet abuse. As you're working in the office, it's much easier now to download improper materials, do things with work computers and work assets that you should not be doing. People don't see you, right? So we've got to have a strong moral code so that you do the right thing at the right time, even when people aren't watching. So we have several theories about the way we form our ethical behavior. Pre-conventional. The pre-conventional level of moral reasoning is common in children, and adults can exhibit this level as well. Reasoners at this level judge the morality of an action by its direct consequences. The pre-conventional level consists of the first and second stages of moral development, and it's solely concerned with the self in an egocentric manner. A child with preconventional morality has not yet adopted or internalized society's conventions regarding what's right or wrong, but instead focuses largely on external consequences that certain actions may bring. In stage 1, which is obedience and punishment driven, individuals focus on the direct consequences of their actions. For example, if an action is perceived as morally wrong because the perpetrator is punished, the last time I did that I got spanked, so I'm not going to do it again, the worse the punishment is for the act, the more bad the act is perceived to be. This can give rise to an inference that even innocent victims are guilty in proportion to their suffering. It is egocentric, lacking recognition that others' points of view are different from one's own. There's a deference to superior power or prestige. An example of obedience and punishment-driven morality would be a child refusing to do something because it's wrong, and that the consequences could result in punishment. For example, a child's classmate tries to dare the child in playing hooky from school. The child would apply obedience and punishment-driven morality by refusing to play hooky because he would get punished. Another example of obedience and punishment-driven morality is when a child refuses to cheat on a test because the child would get punished. Stage 2 is self-interest driven. It expresses the what's in it for me position, in which right behavior is defined by whatever the individual believes to be in their best interest. But it's understood in a narrow way, which doesn't consider one's reputation or relationship to groups of people. Stage 2 reasoning shows a limited interest in the needs of others, but only to the point where it might further the individual's own interests. As a result, concern for others is not based on loyalty or intrinsic respect, but rather a you scratch my back and I'll scratch your back mentality. The lack of a societal perspective in the pre-conventional level is very different from the social contract, stage 5, as all the actions have purpose of serving the individual's own needs or interests. For the stage 2 theorist, the world's perspective is often seen as moral relativism. An example of self-interest driven is when a child is asked by his parents to do a chore. The child says, "What's in it for me?" The parents would offer the child an incentive by giving the child an allowance to pay them for their chores. The child is motivated to do the chores for self-interest. Another example of self-interest driven is when a child does their homework in exchange for better grades and rewards from their parents. And then conventional. The conventional level of moral reasoning is typical of adolescents and adults. To reason in a conventional way is to judge the morality of actions by comparing them to society's views and expectations. The conventional level consists of the third and fourth stages of moral development. Conventional morality is characterized by an acceptance of society's conventions concerning right and wrong. At this level, an individual obeys rules and follows society's norms, even when there are no consequences for obedience or disobedience. Adherence to rules and conventions is somewhat rigid. However, a rule's appropriateness or fairness is seldom questioned. In stage 3, good intentions, the self enters society by conforming to societal standards. Individuals are receptive to approval or disapproval from others as it reflects society's views. They try to be a good boy or a good girl and live up to these expectations. Having learned that being regarded as good benefits the self. Stage 3 reasoning may judge the morality of an action by evaluating its consequences in terms of a person's relationships, which now begin to include things like respect, gratitude, and the golden rule. I want to be liked and thought well of. Apparently not being naughty makes people like me. Conforming to the rules for one's social role is not yet fully understood. The intentions of actors play a more significant role in reasoning at this stage. One may feel more forgiving if one thinks they mean well. In stage 4, which is authority and social order obedience, it's important to obey laws, dictums, and social conventions because of their importance in maintaining a functioning society. Moral reasoning stage 4 is thus beyond the need for individual approval exhibited in stage 3. A central ideal often prescribes what is right or wrong. If one person violates a law, perhaps everyone would, Thus, there's an obligation and a duty to uphold laws and rules. When someone does violate a law, it's morally wrong. Culpability is thus a significant factor in this stage, as it separates the bad dominions from the good ones. Most active members of society remain at stage 4, where morality is still predominantly dictated by an outside force. And the post-conventional theory. At the post-conventional level, also known as the principled level, it's marked by a growing realization that individuals are separate entities from society, and that the individual's own perspective may take precedence over society's view. Individuals may disobey rules inconsistent with their own principles. Post-conventional moralists live by their own ethical principles, principles that typically include such basic human rights as life, liberty, and justice. People who exhibit post-conventional morality view rules as useful but changeable mechanisms. Ideally, rules can maintain the general social order and protect human rights. Rules are not absolute dictates that must be obeyed without question, because post-conventional individuals elevate their own moral evaluation of a situation over social conventions. Their behavior, especially at stage 6, can be confused with that of those at pre-conventional levels. Some theorists have speculated that many people never reach this level of abstract moral reasoning. In stage 5, the world is viewed as holding different opinions, rights, and values. Such perspectives should be mutually respected as unique to each person or community. Laws are regarded as social contracts rather than strict edicts. Those that do not promote the general welfare should be changed when necessary to meet the greatest good for the greatest number of people. This is achieved through majority decision and inevitable compromise. Democratic government is ostensibly based on stage 5 reasoning. In stage 6, universal ethical principles, moral reasoning is based on abstract reasoning, using universal ethical principles. Laws are valid only insofar as they are grounded in justice, and a commitment to justice carries with it an obligation to disobey unjust laws. Legal rights are unnecessary, as social contracts are not essential for deonic moral action. Decisions are not reached hypothetically in a conditional way, but rather categorically in an absolute way, as in the philosophy of Immanuel Kant. This involves an individual imagining what they would do in another's shoes. If they believe what another person imagines to be true, the resulting consensus is the action taken. In this way, action is never a means, but always an end to itself. The individual acts because it's right and not because it avoids punishment. It's in their best interest, expected, legal, or previously agreed upon. Although stage 6 is difficult to identify individuals who consistently operate at that level. So ethics involve doing good and causing no harm. But how one defines what is ethical can vary from person to person. Classes on ethics can give the care provider the tools upon which to base ethical decisions. However, these tools are shaped by the values, beliefs, and experiences of the individual. Consequently, very different choices may be made involving the same dilemma. There are many ethical issues that healthcare providers can encounter in the workplace. These include quality versus quantity of life, freedom versus control, truth-telling versus deception, distribution of resources, and empirical knowledge versus personal beliefs. Quality may address how well a person lives, or perhaps how many people will be affected by a decision. It pertains to how good a life a person may have, and this varies depending on how a person defines good. For instance, you might perform an intervention on a patient that you believe was successful and good. You fabricated a prosthesis, you fabricated a shoe, and you did a great job. It looks great, it fits well, but it doesn't affect the patient. They're not able to ambulate, they're not able to do whatever it was they were trying to do. So in their perspective, it's a bad outcome. So good depends on your definition of good and whether you're the patient, the practitioner, or somebody else. So how does a practitioner support a patient when deciding between a therapy that will prolong life, but the cost isn't fully covered by insurance? The person may be more influential, but they can't afford the intervention. Or they can pay, but they can't afford the high quality. What should the practitioner's position be? No matter how large your business grows, it's the owner's job to create a strong, cohesive company culture. and it's their responsibility to connect the team to that culture. So you need to make culture part of your review process as an owner, as a manager. The code of conduct can't detail a solution for every ethical situation. So companies provide training in ethical reasoning. Helping employees recognize and reason through ethical problems and turning them into ethical actions is a primary responsibility for corporate leadership. We've heard of the Pareto principle. So what does the Pareto principle have to do with your long-term business strategy? We've been taught to treat everyone equally, that every customer is valuable. We're encouraged to devote equal amounts of time to every client simply because we don't want to appear elitist, giving preference to some customers over others. We want to spread our time and attention around, but we're doing it wrong. If we heed Pareto, we learn that 20% of our customers make up 80% of our business. Wow. The vast majority of our revenue comes from a small minority of the patients who walk through our doors. If you spread your time and attention out evenly among all your patients, you're missing out on an enormous opportunity to maximize your business and do business with customers who matter the most. And that's a fact. Some customers do matter more than others. The customers who generate 80% of your revenue, the ones who spend the most with your company and purchase your highest dollar, highest profit offerings, those are the ones who deserve the lion's share of your time and attention. Those clients are the ones who would seriously damage your profitability if they left to patronize another company. They're the ones who keep the lights on, that keep you employed. Your best long-term interests are tied to those patients, and you have to focus additional resources on ensuring that they get the best service you can offer. You can't do good if you don't do well. Do you think this is unethical in your business? How do you respond to that? Executives must demonstrate ethical behavior in their actions. We can talk about ethics all day long, but actions speak louder than words. People will follow your lead. So we have responsibilities to the general public as well. When patients walk into your door and you see issues such as signs of abuse, how do you deal with that? Do you have a policy? Do you have a process? What about when patients have received inappropriate care from another provider? You have an obligation to get that taken care of, report that through the channels. We also want to protect the environment. We're dealing with hazardous materials every day in our work. How do you dispose of them? It's very easy to pour them down the drain, but you should do it the correct way. Recycling. Lots of materials that we use every day, our plastics, are expensive. They can be recycled rather than thrown away. So think about your responsibility to the general public and to the environment as you're doing your work. Developing quality. When you enhance the quality of your overall workforce through education and awareness, you're building better people, better citizens, more informed. That's a responsibility we have to the general public, to raise awareness, to make our people, our employees, good citizens. Corporate philanthropy. When you make money, when you do well, there are many people who can't afford your services or other things that you can provide. Think about contributions to other societies that are helping people, donations of equipment, overseas perhaps even with prostheses or pieces that you can't use anymore, supporting the volunteer efforts of company employees. When there's a passionate issue that they're pursuing, if there's a way to join them in that effort and support them, consider that. We have responsibilities to our patients as well. The patients have a right to be safe. When they walk through your doors, there's a reasonable expectation that they're not going to be harmed because they've come to see you. You want to have safe operation of your products. You want to avoid product liability, obviously. You want to make sure the environment is safe, that your carpets are not frayed. There's no tripping hazards. There's no mold dripping from the ceilings above the patient exam rooms. So maintain a safe environment. Inform your patients. As a podorthist, you're probably aware of these companies that have gone out to Medicare beneficiaries and sold shoes and said it won't cost you a thing. And those patients are harmed by these fraudsters basically providing this footwear to the diabetic population that's inappropriate. Avoid false or misleading advertising. Don't drive people into your business on empty promises, and don't take away a benefit they have that's going to cost them in the long run. Your patients should have a right to choose. They should be informed. Just like your employees, you have a culture, you have a style. Not every patient is going to fit your style. So if you're upfront and honest with them, you're going to have the best fit for patients, you're going to have the best fit for staff. Give the patients the opportunity to choose who their care provider is going to be. And give them the right to be heard. Customers have legitimate complaints and concerns. The most passionate customers, the ones who appreciate you and want to do business with you, are going to be honest. They're going to tell you how they feel. You should listen to them and give them an opportunity to tell you what they think. Because what they think is not uncommon. Other people are going to think the same thing. So listen to the ones who are willing to tell you. It's not easy for them to do that. To work in an organization that has a value system that is incompatible with the employee's value system forces the employee into compromise and loss of self-esteem. There's a quote from Peter Drucker. We want to have a workplace that is conducive to good work, where employees are happy, where they understand what's expected of them on a daily basis, where they are motivated by a strong corporate ethos or philosophy. It's got to be a safe place too. Obviously, we're regulated by the OSHA, Occupational Safety and Health Administration, so we're going to follow those basic guidelines. But we want to make sure that as we do our regulation or regulatory requirements, we're looking at things that really matter to our staff. What kind of quality of life are we providing? Are we driving them to work 24/7? Are we balancing family life with work life? Can we offer flexible scheduling? What can we do to accommodate things to give people, our employees, a better quality of life? We want to have equal opportunity on the job. Again, if we're developing our staff, if we're building employees, training them, and we have a value system in our office, it's clear, we can give our staff opportunities to move to the places they belong in our organization. You've heard quotes about getting the right people on the bus or getting the right people in the right seat on the bus. As corporations grow, as our business changes, sometimes we need to move people around. They're still good on the bus or in our company, but they might fit better in a different seat. So if we have an open environment and discussions with our staff, we can know when the seats are starting to need to be changed. And just because someone's no longer doing a job they were doing before as well as they need to be, doesn't mean they shouldn't be with your company. They may just have a different skill set now, or the skill set required for that position has changed. Of course, legally, we can't discriminate against people for their age. There's a law, our Worker Discrimination Act, age 40 and over, is non-discrimination policy, so make sure you follow that. And of course, sexual harassment and sexism. Our profession has had some history with these issues. It tended to be a male-dominated profession. We have much more diversity now in this, and we need to be sensitive to those issues, the sexual harassment and sexism issues. These are very serious issues that you need to consider and not take lightly. So I want to thank you for your time. Remember that corporate culture is going to dictate your business ethics, that executive leadership actions are going to dictate your corporate culture. Just because you have a fancy slogan doesn't mean that's the way people behave. They're going to behave the way the leaders behave. Think about whether some of your patients matter more than others. Should you consider your business philosophy based on profitability exclusively or in large part? Is it okay to fire customers? Is it okay to limit your practice to certain types of customers, the types that you do well with? Do you have a moral obligation to treat everybody or just a certain segment of the patient population? Does everyone on staff understand and buy into the company culture? Do they abide by it? Is that something that you explain when you're hiring people? Is it part of your orientation process? Don't forget to view the second part of this course, and thank you for your time.
If you would like more information, you can go to our website at ddmanage.com or follow us on Facebook or at LinkedIn.